welcome to In Conservation, the podcast of the Wildlife Trust for Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire. My name is Sophie Baker and I'm the editor of our members magazine Local Wildlife and host of the podcast. This episode is all about the ancient woodlands of the Fen Edge in Cambridgeshire and how we're continuing the long-standing tradition of looking after them in our landscape. I took a walk with my colleague Matt Hamilton around the wonderful Wistow Wood, admiring the intriguing ash stools, orchids and ancient trees, and his deep knowledge about the history and future of this woodland. Ancient woodlands pose lots of challenges for our conservation teams, as well as providing a rich and beautiful habitat to explore and understand. Let's get to it. So here we are at Wistow Wood.
So Wistow Wood, yes. So Fen Edge woodlands. These woodlands kind of ring the edge of the fenland, so it's on the highland around the fen, so they can kind of high in the Cambridgeshire context. So
I was going to say highland.
So
yes.
Generally, we're about 25 to 30 metres above the fens just here. So it very quickly drops down. We're just looking over. If you're on the edge of the woodland, you can look over to Ramsey and you'll see the fen area spreading out in front of you. So there's ring on the high clayland just on the edge of the fenland because they needed woodland, so that's where it would have been. This woodland here is right next to Ramsey Abbey, just down the way, and was part of the domains of the Abbey. So this was just an area of woodland. There's Warboys Wood on our right here, Wistow Wood on our left. These woodlands were owned by the abbots of Ramsey and given to their sons, it seems, over time.
Right.
And later became part of the General Cromwell estate, which is another of our woodlands over in Raveley, just up the road, the Cromwell families. So woodlands like these are ancient woodlands, which generally means in this context medieval, at least. So these woodlands are noted in Domesday Book or Ely Croucher Book, which is the Bishop of Ely's books and records, or the abbots of Ramsey. So back in, say, the 12th century, 13th century records. So they've been around a long time.
Yeah. And
we can define that not just through written sources, but things on the ground. So we're standing right at the entrance.
We are.
A modern road.
Yes.
So this is a road that it divides two woodlands, so Warboys Wood and Wistow Wood. And you can just see there's a ditch either side.
Yeah.
And a bank.
Yes.
And this is the wood bank. So in medieval times, you had a wood bank. Why would you have a wood bank around a wood? It seems a bit bizarre.
Are you really asking me? Because I don't know the answer.
It's not to stop the stuff getting out of the wood. It was more when these woods were regularly cut and used for materials and everything, you had to stop livestock and people from getting in. So they would have had a wood bank, dig a ditch, put a bank up and plant a hedge or stock-proof barrier around the edge to stop the animals coming in, eating all of your young growth in your wood. So, and it also really clearly demarked, this is my wood, not yours. So you'd even divide one wood from another.
Yeah.
Which is what they've done here, which seems a bit weird.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so this road would have been a road. This isn't like a modern road that's cut through one woodland.
No, this is, well, it doesn't really go anywhere other than a few houses down the end.
Yeah.
So originally it's probably a ride in the woodland.
Oh.
So a woodland ride defining two bits of woodland, which has now become a road because there's a few houses and stables down the end, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
Just down to the fen. So rides, roads are all the same thing. It just so happens to be one within a wood or without a wood. So I'm Matt Hamilton. I'm Senior Reserves Manager for Cambridgeshire. So I cover management, helping the teams to manage the nature reserves across Cambs. So ancient woodlands, grasslands, wetlands, and the Great Fen.
Yeah, an amazing area for things like ancient woodlands. So we've got records of this going back as far as records exist, but likely before that?
Yeah, well, so again, we call it ancient woodland because it's probably medieval, but it could have existed, we don't know. Some ancient woodlands may go all the way back to a time before people clearing woodlands, and maybe little tiny fragments of woodland that were left over from the original wildwood. However, that's pretty unlikely in such a densely populated country. But you can tell through LiDAR, so the light emitting radar that you can get, that maps land surfaces. Quite often you can use that in woodlands to see whether they've got evidence of ancient habitation, archaeology, ridge and furrow, so cultivation. This wood hasn't got any of those, but other woods, say Hardwick Wood, which is an ancient woodland in the West Cambs Hundreds, has got a central area that's got no cultivation where the oxlips and things are, but the other areas are clearly much more recent. They've got ridge and furrow, but that's probably hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So woodland can recolonise. So is it ancient or not? Probably not, in terms of it's not original wildwood, but it's hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
Which kind of gives you idea of A, the continuity, and B, where the concept of why they thought these woodlands were special, different. So it was a concept back in, well, the ecologists came up lots of them ago. They were going to woodlands and going, not all woodlands are the same. Some of them are clearly different from others. Some you come along and you go, oh, it's full of bluebells and it's full of wood anemone and oxlips. Why? Well, other than that, I mean, oak trees, ash trees, they all look the same.
Yeah.
But the ground floor is different. Why are the plants different? The plant ecologists going, well, is this the same everywhere? No, it's not. If we look at the records, oh, some of these woods seem to be much older. Seems to be something linked to continuity. And it also seems to be that you get certain groups of plants in certain different areas. So here we are, Wistow. This wood is really, really good in spring for wood anemone and bluebells, but also has primroses and other plants. Now, not plants you find in the wider countryside generally around here, just seem to be restricted to these woodlands.
Yeah, because they don't need to be restricted to woodlands, do they, in terms of the plant's own ecology, like biology? Or
well, some do. So, for instance, bluebells, generally they're not going to. So in the west of the country, where it's wet and colder, bluebells will grow happily outside of woodlands. But in this part of the country, it's too dry, it's too warm. Bluebells need to have that shady, damp climate, which a woodland provides, a microclimate. So you kind of have bluebells restricted to woodland, this part of the country.
Yeah.
Other parts of the country, they can spread more freely. So you might say in the west of the country, bluebells aren't a very good indicator of woodland, whereas in the east of England, they certainly are. But they can spread.
Yeah.
And certain plants like oxlips, they have like a continental distribution. So you need to have a part of the country, and I know it seems a joke, but east of the country is pretty dry, even in the European context. East of England is one of the drier places. There's a lot less rainfall than most of the rest of Europe.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very low rainfall, isn't it? Which is surprising when it comes to the Great Fen and wetlands. But that's its own
because
story.
of Great Fen, because all the water's draining off the uplands and gets stuck in a bowl. So it's a different thing. So oxlips require warm, dry summers and generally cooler winters. So it's a more continental climate. So you're restricted to parts of Britain with a continental climate, which is parts of Cambridgeshire, Essex and Suffolk.
Well, there you go. And if you live in this area, there you go. Now you know we have a continental climate.
Exactly, and it may have been, in the distant past where Britain, which is generally just usually a peninsula of Europe, not an island, there was Doggerland and all the land in between. So oxlips would have been able to spread across all of there. And then when it all flooded and we got separated off, and mainly our climate became oceanic, which is all around the coasts in the west and the north, oxlips couldn't really grow, and they got replaced by primroses that do much better in that kind of climate. So they get restricted a little bit, so they kind of retracted in their range. But it probably would have spread from Eastern Europe all the way across.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
So ancient woodland indicators, you tend to get this kind of suite of plants that grow in certain areas. You can go, okay, well, if I've got this suite of plants, it's an indication my woodland may be old, because it may take hundreds and hundreds of years for these plants to build up. Plus, in this area, there's no way those plants are going to spread across arable fields to get here.
No.
So they are pretty much a relic, unless, of course, in the past there were periods, maybe when the Romans left and we had the early medieval period, and woodland cover maybe spread, or maybe a part of this country on heavy clay soils, much more difficult to cultivate in the past. So maybe there's a lot more woodland, so it was all joined up. And once your woodland gets above a certain threshold size, maybe 30-40% of the landscape, it acts as a connected whole.
Right, yeah.
Which means things can move around.
Yeah.
So ancient woodland indicators become less useful then, because you have a new piece of woodland that's only, say, 100 years old, but it's colonised quite quickly.
Right.
So it's a really useful concept in some places, but not everywhere.
Yes.
In our context of Cambridgeshire, one of the least wooded parts of the entire country, it's really useful because you can say, yes, those indicators give you a good chance that it might be, plus the historical sources, which is why we help Natural England with a recent update of the ancient woodland mapping exercise across Cambridgeshire and other parts of the country, led by a monitoring research team. they did a great job covering flack.
Yeah, and they found some bits that we hadn't discovered before, right? Sort of little pockets of places that hadn't been, or we knew about them, but we didn't know they were necessarily ancient woodland.
There were some new bits.
Yeah.
There were some bits that were revised.
Yeah, so things that we thought were ancient that actually turned out.
Maybe they were old and adjoined to ancient woodlands, but not ancient woodlands themselves.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's checking that detail. So it's a mixture. It's not a fixed concept, but it's kind of something you build up.
Yeah, and we haven't gone inside yet. You see, it's such a fascinating habitat.
So we're going to get inside.
Yeah, we are getting. Well, let's get inside.
That's interesting, just on the edge, right? So
no, go on.
Just standing here, bit of spindle, and this spring, spindle urban moth has just defoliated spindle trees, spindle bushes everywhere. So all you see is this carpet of webs of the caterpillars inside. Absolutely brilliant, fantastic food for birds and everything else who want to eat it.
Kind of like a ghostly, like it's Halloween, isn't it? Like someone's draped cobwebs all over the trees.
Go along the side of the road and you'll just see one's completely covered, and it looks it's really creepy. But actually, the spindle will recover once they've come. Basically, they've wrapped that silk around to protect themselves from predators, and then within that they can eat all the leaves. And they're doing really, really well this year. It's great.
Amazing. And I've heard lots of birds already as well. I've heard chiff-chaff.
Chiff-chaff.
Garden warbler, I think.
Garden warbler, there's garden warblers around, blackcaps, Chetty's warblers, even nightingales are around, so probably won't hear those today, but...
and a wren just piping up there.
This hawthorn.
Yes.
But this is not your usual hedge hawthorn.
No.
So this is midland thorn. You'll see the leaves, rather than divided finely, are in kind of big lobes.
Yeah, I was going to say they look kind of fatter. The leaves look a bit bigger and fatter than...
So this is the type of hawthorn that you'll get growing in ancient woodlands.
Oh, and there's a difference, is there? See, I didn't know
There are different species.
Yeah.
This generally grows in woods. It can grow bigger. There's a difference in the flowers are slightly different. But yeah, its ecological niche is growing as an understory tree inside woodlands.
There you go.
Rather than the shrub that's been planted up and down all the hedgerows, which can grow in different places. Plus, quite often you'll see the one growing, leafing up really early, and that's because it's actually Italian. It's a Southern European one because it's really easy to cultivate. So the growers will tell you that supply it. Really easy to cultivate, and it forms really bushes really quickly.
Right,
so for
which
the
is
last
what
20 or 30
hedges.
years, people have propagated this one, and all the growers have. So it's not actually, so it's slightly different. You can tell the difference between the two, and it leaves up early. So people go, oh, that hawthorn's in, leaf really early, because it's from Southern Europe. But it's European, it's still hawthorn. But yeah, so straight away we're standing on the edge of the ancient woodland, an ancient woodland indicator type plant.
Yeah. Under a beautiful ash tree, is that right?
It is an ash tree. You can see the ash keys on it, so that it's got lots of seeds which it retains for a year or two.
Oh, really?
To hedge its bets, so it doesn't get rid of them all at once. It takes time. Then they can germinate over several years. So 1 year isn't so good. Next year they've still got seeds. So yes, unfortunately, badly affected by dieback disease. Just going through the kissing gate.
And already coming in here, though, I can tell this soil is really dry.
It is,
isn't it? It's cracked. It's like
So we're on heavy clay soils. This is round this part of Cambridgeshire. We're on boulder clay mainly. So we have underlying geology of the older clays. So that's the Oxford clay, 160 million years old, and then the younger geology sitting on top of that is chalk. So chalk is much younger. It's chalk rocks you'll see, and the chalk hills and everything. So South Camp's
I love the idea that rocks are young. This is the thing. Geology is like on a whole different time scale, isn't it? Like really,
say tens of millions rather than hundreds of millions.
Right.
So it's pretty young. However, sitting on top is a mixture. So when the glaciers from the last couple of million years of ice ages backwards and forwards, they churned up clays and chalk and everything else and sands, and then dumped it on top. So this is kind of, on top of that, you then got this chalky boulder clay. So it's heavy clays, but mixed in with lumps of chalk and bits of sand and things.
Right.
So you've got a chalky clay.
Chalky clay.
Is actually quite good for plants growing. So it makes it quite diverse. So although it's really dry at the moment, it is retaining moisture because it's impermeable, the clay, but it's got the chalkiness in it, which allows a greater suite of plants to be growing.
Right.
Plus you mentioned ash trees. Now, ash trees in these woodlands have made them the ground floor and the plants growing up very diverse, because they allow a dappled light through all year.
Yeah, that beautiful dappled light from an ash tree, which it is a sadness that so many of them are failing.
Yeah, and it will be a change, because the trees that might replace them tend to have denser shade, like oak trees, and they change the soil, because the ash leaves also break down really quickly.
Yeah.
So it's a really quick nutrient cycling. So it keeps the soils, topsoils, kind of quite rich. It means that the plants can get the access to nutrients are still there. Whereas if it's an oak tree, the leaves take quite a long time to break down, and they create an acid soil. It locks up nutrients.
Right.
So that restricts the plants that can grow.
Yeah, so the pH is actually different.
It's really important. pH and nutrients can be really important. So if you change your trees, you'll change the complexion of which plants can actually grow.
Yeah, so are we changing? I mean, as the ash dies back, we're faced with this decision, aren't we, in terms of managing these reserves, because the ash are in some cases going to have to be removed because they're dangerous,
Yes, so we'll try and manage as much as possible. So we were standing next to a road. So yes, in this wood, we have had to manage trees along this edge, and we'll continue to do that. And we'll look at a little bit of coppicing that we'll do just on the edge of the wood to facilitate that, so that we don't have to do anything. But most of the time, and this wood has been thinned, so we took some of the ash trees out, hopefully to promote them, the ones that are left, the healthy ones, to produce more seed, in the hope that there will be another generation that are more tolerant of the disease.
Right, yeah. Because it does take a while, doesn't it? I mean, when a tree...
They're trees. Yeah. They do everything much slower. I mean, for them, this is an issue probably for the next few hundred years, and ash will still be around. They'll just be less dominant, and a different suite of trees. Some muntjac have been through here, so we've got some dung.
Looks quite fresh, actually, doesn't it?
It's very fresh. They're probably wandering through here. In fact, what we'll do is we're going to have a little look.
Oh, we have special permission to walk off path here. So we're going through, kind of following a muntjac path. Actually, it looks like.
It is. Well, there's lots of muntjac trails, and we do assess how deer are using our woodlands to give an idea of the impacts. So every year, in spring, we'll be out doing surveys, just looking at what kind of impacts, what they're eating, what they're damaging, how many there might be, just to give us an impression of what we might need to do in terms of protection or any other management that might be needed.
Yeah, and we're walking through quite a thick kind of cover of foliage. What's that plant that's covering here? A sticky willy, I can see, which is what I call it. That's not what everyone calls it.
No, it's got quite a few names. So cleavers, goosegrass, sticky willy. Yes. So this isn't a great sign.
No.
Generally, because usually this is a sign of a nutrient increases.
Right.
But that's partly due to what we're looking across is an area of mainly dog's mercury. This plant is creating absolute carpet everywhere.
Yes, a real carpet. And it's, how high was that? It's kind of up to my knees. Couple of feet, maybe?
Yeah, maybe probably 30, 40 centimetres high. Earlier in the year, this would have been covered in bluebells.
Yeah, and you can just see some of them. You can just see some of them, sort of the sort of fading bluebells, I would say, under the dog's mercury.
Yeah, so we're on the edge of the woodland with the road and the ride to our right, and we're looking down, and we can just see some large ash trees still up in the canopy. But there's no trees now, large trees towards the road, ash trees, because we're concerned. But you can see that they're quite interesting, distinctive, these ash trees.
Yeah. So
we have here an ash tree. Now, unfortunately, it's not looking very healthy. You can see it's got lots of kind of dead twigs and things.
Yeah, it's very thin and spindly looking, isn't it? And
that is dieback disease, so it's dying back. However, another sad thing, or something that you can show the age of the woodland, this is an old coppice stool. So if you look at the big stubs all the way around, you can see this has been cut many times, probably over several hundreds of years.
Yes, it really looks like that, because the stubs that are left are really quite thick, aren't they? It's not like a normal, like a hazel coppice where they're very thin.
No.
They're very wide across, and there's so many of them.
So again, in coppice woodlands, they would have been coppice for different things and in different ways. So hazel coppice and pure hazel coppice is one type of coppice woodland, but actually in this part of the country, East Anglia, that probably wasn't the main type of coppice.
Oh, really? Yeah, because it is quite dominant in terms of what you see as a kind of lay person, as a visitor. I suppose because they're quite obvious when they're done like that. And
quite often, and or parts of woodlands were promoted. So this is people's influence and management. So this woodland was an ash coppice woodland. Ash historically grows incredibly well on these soils and would just take over.
Yeah.
So in terms of a coppice system, it's likely in a wood like this, you would have some oak trees you're allowed to grow for 50 to 100 years for timber, for building, but you'd also have lots of ash. Ash grows really, really prolifically around here. Ordinarily, it would seed everywhere, but you also have these big old stools. So you would let it grow for a certain number of cycles. Your cycle might be 20 years, say.
Yeah.
And you cut it for firewood, or it might be shorter, maybe only 7 to 10 years. And you're cutting it for poles, for handles, for tools and other things, or smaller firewood. But yeah, you can see lots of sprouts coming out from the base of this coppice stool.
Yeah, that's extraordinary, isn't it? Really, trees. It just shows, doesn't it? I mean, they are amazing. You know, we've got this tree that's dying of ash dieback, this big tall tree with the big sort of thick stumps at the bottom, but then these sort of bright little shoots coming out of it, out of a seemingly dead bit of tree, really.
Yes.
It's amazing.
And also, we mentioned deer a little while ago. You might just see what looks like white paint.
Yes. Yes, I was going to ask you what that was, actually.
So this is part of a trial where obviously deer can be a real problem, and deer in high numbers can suppress regeneration of trees and shrubs.
Yeah.
They can eat a lot of your ground flora, bluebells and everything else, and have really negative impacts in woodland in high numbers. So we have issues where we want to know how many deer we've got, and we don't want to have too big an impact. But it's very difficult, even if you wanted to, say, control deer by some means of culling, to do that or know that you're doing anything effectively. So we have tried background, you can see some fencing, we've fenced whole woodlands and other things, but once your deer are within your fence, it's kind of game over. Doesn't work.
And it's expensive as well, isn't it, to maintain a deer fence?
And it's not so effective. However, sometimes if you're coppicing, you just need your coppice to get to a certain height. So if you've got muntjac deer, once it's above, say, 1.5 meters, 5 foot, it's too tall for them to really affect. So if you've got a small area, maybe you could do something just to make that young, fresh coppice growth, again, going back to medieval times when they didn't want animals coming in, to browse off this lovely fresh stuff.
Yes, yeah. And it's not like you can put a guard around it, because it's not like a new young sapling that's just, a little guard, whatever.
Could, but how long it would take.
But this is really wide. I mean, this is, 2 meters. You'd need something 2 meters around, wouldn't you? Like its own mini fence, really, which doesn't make much sense for every tree.
So the white paint is actually a product called Trico, and it's a deer repellent made from a fat.
Wow. So
you spray it on, and the deer seem to be deterred from the smell or possibly the taste of it.
How interesting. And I mean, obviously this is extremely anecdotal. I'm looking at one in a woodland of many, but there doesn't seem to be much damage. It doesn't seem to be.
I mean, it's hit and miss. We have done trials in other coppice woodlands on selecting, say, 50 stools, they're called, whether they're hazel or whatever, spray 50, don't spray another 50, or a number in each wood, and then compare. And it does seem to have a significant effect and allow the coppice to get away in that first year or two.
Yeah, fantastic.
In which case then it's less of a problem. Not helping with your ground flora or tree seedling regeneration or anything else.
No, because the deer can still get those, and you can't just spray it everywhere, because that'd be, expensive, presumably.
Expensive both in time and material for the actual spray. But it's part of the suite of things that we would do to maintain these. And the difficult thing about these ash stools is with the ash dieback, if these stools are hundreds and hundreds of years old, these are the equivalent of a really old tree.
Yes.
And although they're not the big tree, big parkland trees with lots of dead wood in them, the base of the stools are dead wood in continuity of hundreds of years. So if you've got dead wood invertebrates and other things, where they'll be is within these stools. So if we now lose these whole stool systems, you're losing quite an interesting part of the woodland's ecology. So we need to make sure that that dead wood resource is still here going forward.
Because they are really interesting shapes. There's lots of sort of nooks and crannies, aren't there, sort of naturally within them.
They are, because they're cut differently. So if you're cutting hazel coppice, you'd probably cut it to the ground. Hazel grows basically from its roots. So you cut it right to the ground, take the whole thing. With ash, it tends to kind of sprout higher up.
Right.
So you can see they've also, probably, the woodsman over hundreds of years going, why would I cut it at the ground when I can cut it at waist height?
Yes.
It's much easier, it saves my back, not such a problem. And back in the past, they didn't use machinery for harvesting. It would be a horse or men, women coming and collecting stuff and taking it out. So there was no reason to cut things low.
When you didn't need to.
You didn't need to. So hence you get all of these high ash coppice stalls throughout them. But another reason for cutting them is if you leave them with these decayed bases, they will collapse anyway. Right, yeah,
because the weight of the tree on the rotting base.
Because it's not, you can see it's full of holes and cavities. So you do need to manage that.
So the other thing we're looking at across here is a lot of...
The very obvious thing.
A lot of yellow
tubes.
Tubes, are they tree guards?
They are tree guards, and probably if you look inside, you will see, yes, there is a plant in there, although there's also some cleavers and other things. It looks like some spindle. So we said about the issue of ash dieback. One of the things with climate change, new pests and diseases coming in, threats to our ancient woodlands, is that actually people have managed them in a certain way for hundreds of years, which has meant in some respects they've lost some of their diversity of species. So this wood, about 80% ash trees, just a few oak trees. And probably in the past there would have been a more diverse range of trees and shrubs, but the human management, which was just looking for lots and lots of ash, promoted ash, and pretty much they would cut out or get rid of the things they didn't want or need. Now there's problems with ash. You could then suddenly look at a woodland with, we just have oak trees and field maple and maybe a few other things. So planting is pretty much a failure in an ancient woodland. Generally, we would always rely on natural generation wherever possible. However, we have got natural generation here. You can see some hawthorn growing, there's blackthorn growing. The ash, where it is trying to regenerate, there will be some oak seedlings and saplings here and there. But what we've done is to increase the diversity of trees. Maybe we've planted some trees that are less common, but do occur locally. So everything that does occur in local woodlands, but is absent for one reason or another in this woodland. So things like aspen, some alder, some birch, some cherry, a broad sweet, or even small leaved lime, which is a tree that used to be really common in lowland England. It kind of disappeared. So adding in some more species. So that hope is that then going forward into the future, there's more resilience because we've got a more diverse mix. It's only in small areas. And the tree tubes is something we trialled for a number of years. These are actually, I think they're pine resin and wool.
Oh, that's amazing. I was going to say, because they're not plastic, and that's
not plastic,
which is amazing, because obviously there has been a reliance for a long time, hasn't there, on plastic tree guards, which understandably people are starting to get a bit sort of twitchy about.
It's very difficult to recycle plastic tree guard. It's very expensive to manufacture, and it causes pollution. So why would we want to put something polluting in our woodland? These should break down naturally within 3 to 5 years.
So long enough for the plants to regenerate, but they're not reliant on a lot of people coming along either, because that's the other thing about plastic tree guards, is they need removing at some point.
They do.
Often they're not, are they? I mean, you see them not necessarily in our reserves or anything, but I do often see, split plastic guards around hawthorn that are obviously
and they will
far
just,
too old
just
for it, and
be there for many, many, many years, breaking down into microplastics and causing pollution. So don't use those. And actually, we're moving away even from tree guards. So we've also done some trials and gone, okay, a plant, a sapling, will probably cost you about £1. The tree guards cost you about £4, and a stake is about £1. So we kind of did some very simple sums going, wait a minute, for a £1 plant, we're spending £5 on protection, and they don't always survive in the tree guards anyway. So actually what we're moving towards in other places is just planting 3 times as many plants,
Right.
not protecting them.
Yeah.
And if you lose
Yeah.
a quarter or a third of your planted trunk, it doesn't matter.
No, kind of like allotment planting, you know, when
Yeah,
you lose
we
things,
just
you just plant more than you need.
broadcast. Yeah. It does seem to work just as well. And you can plant them more densely, which sometimes works because you've more dense planting, they'll grow up together and go for the light and form a thicket much quicker.
Right, which
So-
is good for lots of your birds and things as well, isn't it, for nesting?
Yeah, so we'll see how this works,
Potentially.
but you can see that there's blackthorn and other things coming through here. That may well just take over first for a number of years, and then some of the trees that have been planted will grow through.
Will grow through. But I mean, that's the thing, though, is that there's a lot of innovation, isn't there? Is it even... the other thing I want to say is I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily realise that the woodlands that we have left aren't just a naturally occurring sort of feature of the landscape. They are managed, and they have been managed, and that's why in most cases why they still exist, because they've been used by humans, like you were talking about, you know, for particular trees, for particular things, for building materials, for all kinds of things. And so there's not really, or well, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like there's really much just natural woodland that's just been left on its own.
There is
to exist.
in England, probably the early medieval period was the end of any wild wood that existed.
Yeah.
Everything since then has been managed, cut down.
Absolutely.
And we're standing in Wistow Wood, separated, although part of as well, just the other side is Warboys Wood. Well, Warboys Village is that way, Wistow Village is the other way. General medieval village pattern around here, you'd have your fields that you do most of your stuff in closer to, you would then have maybe open fields a bit further out, you'd then have your common or wastes, which is your grazing, large grazing area a bit further out, and then finally your woodland, because you're only going there to go and get stuff at certain times of the year.
Yeah, and the name is what gives it away. That's what you're saying, isn't
Wistow
it?
Wood,
Is it
Wistow Parish. This was their
Exactly.
wood. There's a footpath that runs where we were standing, straight over to Wistow Village.
Yeah.
That's where they would have come, and they would have used exactly the same road to haul the stuff backwards and forwards.
Yeah, and so the Wildlife Trust coming in, now owning these woodlands and coming in and doing management work is part of a very long tradition, albeit for different reasons. But,
Absolutely.
But it's a very long tradition of management, and so it's important that these things are kind of considered.
And we've allowed
isn't it?
people to have access. So
Yeah.
although this is Wistow and Warboys Wood, there is no access to private wood at Warboys. The people of Warboys are now excluded from their own woodland, whereas Wistow Wood still come and enjoy.
Here's a little aside, just for you. One reason our 3 counties are a special place for wildlife. BCN Beauties.
Hello, my name is Ruth Hawksley and I am the Water for Wildlife Officer for the Wildlife Trust for Beds, Cambs and Northants, and I work in Cambridgeshire. Chalk streams have been in the news a lot in recent years, unfortunately mostly due to the bad condition these amazing habitats are in across the UK. The water for chalk streams collects as rain soaks through porous chalk bedrock into aquifers, and where the water table is high enough, it emerges in springs bubbling up from the ground. The chalk-filtered water, when this natural cycle is in place, is clean, low in nutrients and rich in minerals, and maintains a consistent temperature throughout the year, all of which make them a specific and vital habitat for a rich array of species, including brown trout, water voles, and a huge number of invertebrates. At their best, chalk streams offer a quintessential river experience of glistening, crystal-clear waters with flourishing greenery and an abundance of wildlife. Worldwide, there are only 200 or so chalk streams, and 85% of those are in southern and eastern England. Unfortunately, these jewels in our landscape are under increasing pressure. One of the key problems is abstraction, which reduces the flow of these streams considerably, meaning many dry out completely in summer. Low rainfall this spring means we're expecting extremely low flows and more rivers drying up later this year. All the water for Cambridge and its surrounding area comes from groundwater, leaving less for the river. Low flows also mean that pollution from nitrogen-rich agricultural runoff, water treatment and other sources is less diluted and has a greater impact on the river. In addition, the many changes caused by climate change are taking their toll, and over the centuries since at least Roman times, our chalk streams have been altered, straightened and deepened to improve drainage, reduce floodplain flooding, run mills and operate water meadows. which usually reduces the habitats available for wildlife. The Wildlife Trust for BCN is a partner in catchment partnerships, including those for the Cam, the Ely Ouse and the Upper Bedford Ouse. Through these we work with everyone, from farmers and landowners to industry, householders and water companies, to try and reduce water use and improve these habitats for wildlife, which is vital for biodiversity and all of our well-being. We also run projects to restore the physical features that have been lost, such as re-wiggling rivers, replenishing the gravel of dredged streams for spawning fish, and removing redundant weirs. But all of this relies on there being water to flow through the streams, so collectively reducing our water use is key. Fixing that dripping tap or switching to river-friendly cleaning products can have a huge impact. Collecting rainwater for the garden and finding ways to reduce water use at home or at work are really valuable. As with many environmental issues, we need changes to water management at government level as well as locally. So please let your MP know that healthy chalk streams and a sustainable water supply are important to you. Everyone can do something. Thank you for all that you do to help restore these sparkling habitats.
So we're going to have a little tramp a little bit further on, I think. So we can see an ash stump here that's grown, but already you can see dead leaves at the top, discolouring. So this is the classic ash dieback. So this is the problem with those stools. We're coppicing, they're getting to about up to 2 metres, but then starting to die back. But this blackthorn is already forming a thicket, so it's regenerating quite well. Still see there's a few bluebells.
Yes, they are still holding on, aren't they, despite the dry weather? Yeah.
Hopefully the good weather and lots of insects has meant you can see these seeds.
Oh yes, yeah, they're quite big, aren't they? Compared to the plant, those kind of seed
really
pods.
Big black seeds and bluebells.
Right.
This is again one of the issues of how bluebells spread. When you see the seeds, so the pods will open in a little cup. So the stem stays nice and tall and straight, and you have the seeds, and they sit there in a little cup, and they're really heavy. So eventually it'll just kind of rot and they'll fall down and drop by the base.
So they don't go very far.
Other than spreading by the bulb separating, something needs to move them around.
Yeah, what do you think that was? Is it something that's now missing, or do we know?
Possibly boar.
Maybe
possibly
rootling
bison,
about.
Possibly other large creatures.
Do you think
eating...
I was going to say, would there be a bird maybe that would eat them, or
I don't think so. But yeah, large seeded things in woodland, difficult to spread. So again, it's not helping itself. It's getting stuck in ancient woodland, and it's difficult to get out because it likes to grow in. So it's a species, the kind of early vernal spring species, that it's going to grow up before the tree leaves come out. So it starts leaves around Christmas time. That's when we start seeing the leaves in the woodland, which is a bit of an issue because we don't want to trample bluebells.
No, and that's really important actually that people know that, because I think people think of bluebells as a spring thing and like, oh, mustn't trample the bluebells in spring. But actually, if the leaves are there from Christmas, that's quite a long period of time.
For management, because you're like, wow. So certain ancient woodlands where the bluebells come up, another brown flora comes up early, you have to get your work done in that autumn, early winter window.
Yes, so if you're coming in with any machinery or heavy boots or whatever,
it's a pressure to get stuff done. And then of course they do their flowering, and their leaves are now dying back as it gets dry. But obviously there's enough moisture in the ground, even though it's all cracked and horrible, they've still got enough to keep growing. So if we walk down, so this was coppiced a couple of years ago.
Right, yeah, so seeing a couple of years growth.
Timber's been extracted and it's now starting to regenerate. And then that plot, so that part wasn't fenced, but that area was.
Oh yeah, so there's a fence around that. Yes, I see.
So yes, this is a new type of fencing we use, which is, we've borrowed them from building sites. So Harris panels, the nice big 3-metre panels you can easily bring in, and we only put it up for a few years and then we need to remove it, otherwise all the trees and shrubs grow through it and it's almost a permanent fence. So you have to be pretty careful how long you leave it for. Nice little wren singing on the...
Oh yeah. Don't often see them singing actually. Usually in a thicket, aren't they? You
can see, even though this was fenced, it's not unfortunately, after a year or two, it's not particularly deer-proof, because if you look at this hawthorn
Oh yeah.
there, you can see it's kind of nibbled
Oh
nibbled
yeah.
around the
It's
edges.
kind of like a
Slightly bonsai'd. That's what the deer tend to do.
yeah.
You can also see the big field maple stool in the middle is now big and getting away. Unfortunately, we've got an ash stool there because it's completely died off.
Yeah, it's just sticks, isn't it?
We've lost it. And also, can you see the stems? Can you see there's bits of bark missing?
Yes.
Been rubbed off. So that's where the deer are rubbing their antlers. It's called fraying. So in this, to get the velvet off the antlers, they'll rub on but it does also damage the trees and stems. But it's another sign that you've got deer around. So we've got nibbled off things and frayed things, and we've seen dung. So we know there's a population of deer in here. So we just have to be mindful of that. Gaps in the tree bark.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
So if we look up into the crown of this tree, we can see it's quite badly affected by ash dieback.
Oh yeah.
The branches have died right back, and then we get this iteration where you get called epicormic growth, so growth coming out lower down.
Try and compensate.
But clearly here also there's been issues with, once the trees are weakened, other things can get in, so the defences are kind of down, so the roots get attacked by fungi, but also beetles and other things can get in. So this is likely to have been some kind of damage, and then woodpeckers digging through.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah,
that looks
at beetles and other things, but the tree is fighting back.
Yeah, it's growing round, isn't
growth.
it? It's that's amazing. You don't often see woodpecker damage at the, well, I don't. I've never seen woodpecker damage at like my head height. I would imagine mostly they're really high up, but obviously not.
Depends where. I mean, on stumps and things, they can dig right into stumps or stubs or snags, which are kind of dead trunks that are broken up quite high, say above head height. They will dig through them and down. But yeah, unfortunately, this is not a tree possibly with a long, healthy future.
But it's still though, all those things that are feeding on it also need something to feed on, don't they? So
exactly. So
dead wood is really important.
So ash dieback is an issue in some ways, but it's actually providing a great resource. The problem is how long that resource lasts, because if all the trees go fairly quickly, you'll have a superabundance of dead wood. Then it goes. And the other problem is with ash trees, they don't form a heartwood like oak. They form like a ripe wood. But that means that actually when fungi gets into them, and there's a shaggy bracket fungus, Inonotus hispidus, and that's quite good at punching through ash's defence, and it will cause a central rot. Great for woodpeckers and other things, because then they can get in, excavate that hole, make a nice big hole. It's big enough, then other bird species, other bats and other things can use it. So if we lose all the ash trees that were good for hole nesting things, it will take a good few hundred years for us to get lots of oak trees with those kind of holes. So
yes, takes a long time.
It's going to be a bit of a gap, which is a bit of a worry really, because ash grow quite fast and quite big. These trees are probably only 60, 70 years old at most, and just starting to become interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a bit frustrating that we're going to lose them.
Yeah, and the timelines do make it really difficult to manage, I would imagine, because so you can see this coming in how a sort of timeline, but anything you do now won't happen in time to fix the problem. So is it possible to fill that gap that you can see on the horizon?
Not really, but we can do some things. It's a bit like climate change. All you can do is more, bigger, better joined up. So we know ecological principles. If you have more woodland, obviously that gives it more space, better in terms of well-managed habitat, and join it up together. So this is one bit of a larger woodland, but actually if you have more woodland. But part of that planting we were doing, we've planted things like birch trees, alder trees, cherry trees. Now, different types of trees have different strategies. So ash and oak dominate and stay there for hundreds of years. So an ash tree might last 200 or 300 years in a woodland, maybe an oak tree 500 years. Birch, pioneer trees, so these are trees that generally start off on the outside, grow fast, die young. Yeah. But that means that they get old features much quicker. So if you have some birch trees and some cherry trees, they're going to grow a lot quicker. They'll grow up quickly, but then they're going to die back, so have lots of dead wood. So actually, if you have that diversity of species, it gives those ecological niches to things earlier. So that's part of what we're doing. So we're going, okay, what can we do within the wood? What can we do without the wood?
Yeah.
But yeah, we just need landscape scale stuff, ideally, but if not, making sure the resilience within the woodlands is pretty good.
Yes.
Well, there's still pretty dense bluebells through here. Again, so now we're at coppice that's, say, 5-6 years old. And you can see, rather than it being open, we've now got tall 4 metre, 5 metre tall coppice stools of field maple and oak, hazel, hawthorn, blackthorn. It's closed canopy, but covered in bramble, like a dense impenetrable thicket. So these thickets, but yeah, you can see all this rose and everything else. So this is great for our warblers and our ground nesting birds and everything else. You can also see the really dense carpets of bluebells underneath.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it?
They will survive quite happily under this really dense thicket of bramble and coppice growth. But for them, it's great because it's actually excluding all the other competitive plants.
Yes, so
like
that
grasses and sedges and other things that might actually be able to compete with them quite effectively. Some dryad saddle on the stump there, fungi.
I was going to say, you're going to have to say what that is. Fungi have such fantastic names. It's like if people just talk about a moth to me, it's just, some of the names like, oh, there's a sooty footman or something. And I'm like, yeah. What did you say that was called?
Dryad saddle.
Dryad saddle. What a great name.
It's a stump rotting fungus.
Yes, and that's exactly where it's growing.
Yeah,
on a little rotting stump.
It's doing its thing. So again, ancient woodlands, so you've got the indicator plant species, but it's not just plants. So over time, so there's this concept that if you've got a new area, you get lots of colonists, and lots of those colonists might be rare. So if you had a brand new site that's just been cleared, you get all things that like new open space and everything. And woodlands are a bit like that. So when you first create a woodland, it'll still be really open. You've got lots of open space species, different plants, and lots of insects coming in. Then trees will grow up, shade most things out. You get the boring 100 years.
Yes, I've heard tell of this boring 100 years a lot. Is that secondary woodland?
Secondary woodland, basically, researchers found, looking at the species diversity and the structure, because a lot of the things about woodland that we said about the holes in trees and rot, and the structure is really, really important to this diversity. Like we've got here, we've got low-growing stuff, really dense stuff, bramble, big trees, dead wood. You don't have any of that in early secondary woodland. It takes about 100 years for it to start having those things. So there's not the niches, there's not the spaces for all those different species. So it's really boring and ecologically really quite poor.
Yes.
So creating woodland now, unless it's next to an ancient woodland or it's kept open or managed, it's going to be pretty boring for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So you have really exciting, really interesting first phase when it's all regenerating. It's basically like scrubby woodland. Brilliant. Strawberry Hill, classic example.
Yeah.
Fantastic, about really new habitat, a mixture of grassland, mosaic of scrub and everything else. Fabulous. If we just left Strawberry Hill and then it all closed canopy and it went dark and dingy, you'd lose loads of those really interesting niches and open spaces and other things. And it would become secondary woodland, pretty boring for 100 years, until it started falling, trees started falling over, deadwood, other things colonising. An ancient woodland, if you imagine, has been through that so many different times.
Yeah. And
the continuity of fungi, insects, plants that have built up over hundreds, maybe even 1,000 plus 2,000 years. That's why they're so rich in species. Yeah. Because they're old. They're old and they're stable, and the things have been here and they've colonised and they can stick. A new woodland, you're starting from scratch, so you just don't have that. So they're incredibly precious for species diversity, for human interests, because these are archaeological sites. These are soils that have been preserved possibly for hundreds of thousands of years. They've not been ploughed, they've not been fertilised, they've not been pesticides and herbicides put on them.
Yep.
They've got communities of invertebrates and fungi and plants, birds, mammals that have built up all this time that form these unique assemblages that
which
are so precious.
And you can't recreate really. And because even if you planted a woodland now from scratch and left it 300 years and came back to it, it wouldn't be the same. It'd still be interesting in its own right, but it wouldn't be the same, would it? It wouldn't be the same.
Again, depends where you plant it. There are examples. There's a broad wilderness, for instance, where they did that in the 1850s, I think.
Yeah.
It's just a field they let go, but it's not connected to anything else. It's still pretty boring secondary woodland. It won't have this rich ground flora of bluebells and other things because it can't get there. How does a bluebell get? Unless someone picks it up and takes it.
Yeah.
And again, even
which is illegal, by the way, just to say to listeners, you're not allowed to dig up
without the landowner's permission.
Yeah.
But yeah, this rich ground flora can't get there. Insects eventually could get there because they're more mobile, but there are some insects that are kind of in ancient woodland. Why do they want to leave?
Yes, they're not going to go looking for another ancient woodland if they're already in one.
I mean,
especially across a field or over a road.
It might be quite a barrier. It might take a long time for individuals to actually spread and form populations. So, whereas in a woodland like this, they can just move around.
Yeah.
So, it's incredibly precious. Pretty much you can't recreate it because the soils will be different, the starting point will be different, the species that get them will be different, the management will be different. So
yes, because you're not going to have the history.
Woodland. This is semi-natural woodland that's as much to do with its history as it is to do with anything else. We're just going to have a look a bit further down here. This young oak tree that we're seeing in front of us.
It's a very strange shape for an oak tree.
Well,
or is it?
Because this oak tree was growing and those other two there were growing in a dense bit of woodland. So they were growing up in amongst the ash trees. Everything had grown tall and straight. So that's what happens in woodland, tall and straight. You look around, there are no side branches on these trees. They've all grown up to the light. We've removed the other trees from around it, removed the competition.
So now it looks a bit mad.
So it has just produced all of this growth straight off the trunk, all this growth. So it's basically creating a whole crown as if it's an open grown tree. Hopefully these oak trees we've left will now be able to, flower, fruit and set seed. So we'll have a new generation of oak trees coming through.
They do look very healthy on their kind of...
They've suddenly gone, oh wow, I was this suppressed thin little oak tree in the wood and now you just let me take over. So yeah, I was just going to say, here we can see a classic coppice plant, early purple orchids.
Oh yes, orchids.
And these are pretty huge ones as well. Over the back, many years ago, I found some and put a little cage around it. You might just
see.
So there's now a thicket of early purple orchids in there, and then you'll see scattered individuals outside. But again, early purple orchids will persist for years and years, decades, kind of suppressed, a bit like other orchids in woodlands like greater butterfly orchids, until conditions are right. So when it gets opened up, suddenly they get loads of light. They can flower, put up a spike, and do their thing.
Yeah, those are really quite tall, aren't they?
They are doing incredibly well because these have been in the open for a few years. So much like oxlips and other things, why coppicing works for them is they can survive in low numbers scattered out through a woodland.
Eke out a living.
A few flowers. But if you open it up, suddenly they get a few years with loads of light, no competition, they flower, set loads of seed. Next few years, more plants, more seed, more flowering. Then it all gets shaded over. They're suppressed for say 10, 15 years. You open it up, but then you've got twice as many plants as you had before.
Yes.
You keep doing that on a cycle, suddenly you get loads and loads of oxlips, loads and loads of early purple orchids.
That's amazing. You must know this wood so well then to be able to just lead me straight to that little cage of orchids that you found. When did you find that little cage? They wasn't caged at the time. But...
I don't know, probably about 20 years ago.
Wow. You just keep checking in on them. So
that's the continuity is part of the kind of conservation thing, that you know where things are and you can come back once things have been identified and you check on them and you say, oh, it's still there. That's what people really like in reserves teams and conservation teams, that you can go, yes, I know that place. I know where these things are and I can go year on year.
And I think that's, something that the people that work for the Trust, there's a real love for the places. That's the thing I always get from talking to people who work here, who are looking after these places.
That just builds with the intimate knowledge. So the difference here, we can still see one early purple orchid.
Two.
But you can see a whole group of them here.
Oh yes, and there as well.
So this area was opened up and it's literally, you can see the logs lying around everywhere.
Yes.
So it's bin coppice. There's more early purple at the back, but because they're out in the sun, they were able to grow, do their thing, and they've already set their pollineas.
What does that mean? It's a very technical term.
So the pollinated area, so the seeds. So rather than just a seed, that is absolutely packed with thousands upon thousands of orchid seeds.
Wow.
Pollinia. So seeds then will dry out. There'll be like a dust. It's like a really, really fine dust. And it has to touch the ground and find the right fungus to invade, get the energy for a few years before it can put its own leaves up.
So what, it needs a fungus as well? Didn't know that.
So all orchids, they have a life cycle that's combined with a fungus.
Wow.
So the seeds don't have they're like powder. So they're so fine, they don't have the energy. Because usually a seed is made up of, it germinates, 2 cells, 1 cell becomes a food source, the other side is more of the energy. So when it comes up, you get those cotyledons. So, like you get 2 cotyledons on dicots, 1 on 1. So grasses are monocots, they just get 1 cotyledon coming up. So it's 1 fertilised part of the cell, whereas the other one is 2. So you get 2 cotyledons. That's the energy source.
Yeah. So your classic is like a bean or something when
your
with
bean
a kid,
comes up.
It
comes up and it's got those two leaves, and those are the first cotyledons. Then you get your proper leaves, true leaves coming up. So the energy's then been taken from there. Orchids don't have that, but they're incredibly successful because what they do instead is go into the ground, or if tropical rainforest, I guess they're up in the canopy. They'll find a fungus, they invade the fungus. I guess there's some kind of competition between the fungus and the plant. And if that seed is successful, it will take over some of the resources of the fungus. It will steal them for a few years to grow its root system until it puts up its own leaves.
See, that's just amazing. So this is the thing about preserving places like this, is that, I'm sure there's loads of stuff going on like that we don't even know about, kind of, the relationships between different organisms that are speaking to each other or using each other's resources. Or
it's probably another reason why you're getting early purple orchids just in ancient woodlands, because if you haven't got that rich diversity of fungi, and they're probably mycorrhizal fungi, so you know that trees and plants use mycorrhizal fungi, so there'll be a whole network spread throughout this woodland, through the soil, connecting all the trees and plants together. So these mycorrhizae are taking starches, sugars from the trees that they're connected through the roots, and they're giving them back nutrients that is more difficult for them to gather from the ground. So the plants don't need such big roots. Fungi are everywhere in this connected hyphal mat. The orchids then need to tap into those.
Yeah, it really is like tapping into
a specific fungus that the specific orchid needs.
Yeah.
So again, but how long does it take for that fungi to spread out and be common everywhere? And again, you will only get the orchids in certain places, but early purples are classic. You open up the woodland and that'll happen. I mean, another plant that perhaps is opposite to being positively, this is wood anemone.
Oh yeah.
Which is lots and lots in this woodland, but that doesn't like coppicing so much because it likes growing in the shade. So when you open it all up, you can see like all the lesser celandine.
Oh, is that what that is? Sort of yellow leaves.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the kind of drying conditions you're now getting this coppice plot isn't really great for the wood anemone in the same way. That kind of quite likes stable conditions and spreads really slowly, mainly through vegetative spread. So if you have big sheets like you do in this woodland, then it can cover acres.
Yeah.
And it's only spreading by its roots quite slowly each year.
Right.
You're looking at hundreds and hundreds of years to get that kind of size of plant. This wood sedge is quite a nice little plant. But also a sign, because you can see the consequences of your management. This is where things were extracted. So the soil we said about the soil profiles being pretty much stable and not impacted. If you bring heavy machinery like happened here, it kind of mixes up the soil, changes it.
Yeah.
It gets wetter, damper. You get rushes coming in, sedges coming in.
Yeah.
So you can kind of read woodlands about what people have done and when they've done them, even if
interesting.
It's been spread out and moved around. The plants tell the story because they're generally trying to heal things over. That's how I like to think of it. Plants kind of you've got bare ground, you get the colonists coming in and they change the conditions, and the next plant change conditions until they kind of eventually make it suitable for woodland. It kind of fixes it, caps. Yeah, another little bit of planting going on here, and you can see it's very open, this bit of woodland.
It is.
So we took out about half of the ash trees.
Right.
You can still see mainly just ash trees.
Yeah,
But
not looking
if
very
you look
well
at the crown,
either.
I mean, that one is just dead, mostly dead. So we've done some planting underneath. You can just see an alder actually sticking out from one of the tree guards ahead of us. But we've got this brambly. It's not terrible. What we're going to have is this kind of brambly understory, all the shrubs, hawthorn, blackthorn, will kind of regenerate, and it will be lovely. But it will look different. This, if you came 15 years ago, would have been lots of dense, tall ash trees over a carpet of bluebells and dog's mercury.
Yeah.
Wood anemone. Whereas now what you're looking at is lots and lots of bramble and blackthorn thickets and other things. So the ground floor is still underneath there.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to take about 20 years for it to shade out and go back to that. So it's a big change.
Yeah.
To the woodland.
But it's not done lightly, is it? I mean, nothing we do in these woodlands is done lightly. It's all done, with the long-term future of the wood in mind, and with, this ongoing management that needs to happen.
And an ash that didn't win its battle with dieback.
Now that's amazing. That's what an extraordinary thing. It's a really old tree stump, well, relatively, being eaten by obviously some fungus there, growing on it like welts.
Yes, well, listen, kick one off. There you go.
What's that? Wow.
Can you see there's concentric
There
circles?
Are. Yes.
Yes, so this is Daudinia concentrica, also known as cramp balls.
Cramp balls, I can see
or
why.
more popularly as King Alfred's cakes.
Aha, okay.
Because they look like burnt little cakes.
They really do.
Mainly grows on ash, lives on ash for years and years and years until the ash starts dying, and then it turns pathogenic and kills off and eats the ash. Right, we're going to walk downhill a little bit.
Imagine that.
Hill-ish. Yeah, so the ring of the Fen Basin, Fen uplands as they call them.
It's all relative.
Well, everything's upland to the Fens.
Including the sea.
yeah. Which is pretty unusual, isn't it, really? So here's an area when we've done here is create a ride. It was a ride many, many years ago, and we kind of restored it. So when we did the ash thinning, we actually kind of open up this area, and we come and cut this annually, so treat it more like grassland.
Yeah, and the ground seems to have retained quite a lot more moisture in this part of the wood. Is that because we're lower down?
We're lower down, so suddenly we are now, we've dropped about 20 metres from the road. So now we're kind of into the Fen Edge, so it is a bit wetter, impeded drainage. And this does cause part of this wood to be closed, or the whole wood, some years, because this will just be a muddy, water-covered mess, which people say, oh, well, I'll wear my wellies, and that's fine, but what ends up happening is you end up with a wider and wider impact.
People skirt around the deeper bits, don't they? They skirt around the puddles, even in wellies. It just widens everything, doesn't it? It can be quite devastating, can't it, in a bluebell woodland, for example?
It can, and also we don't really want people slipping over in a remote woodland and getting injured.
No. Yeah, and also the thing is that, because as you can tell here as well, is that when it gets really muddy and then people do walk on it, then when it dries in these sort of ridged, sort of unpredictable ways, doesn't it? Which makes it quite difficult even when it is dry.
And with clay being an impermeable, really fine, fantastically fine particles, walking on it puddles it. That's how you make a pond. It's just like pottery. Yes. So if you compact it, you puddle it, which means water then sits there when it does rain. So you've created the problem, and it kind of stays because the water then can't get through, and if there's no vegetation to put roots through, it's nice, great.
Yeah, so sometimes we do have to close woodlands. I mean, that's just the reality of it, to protect people and to protect the woodland for them to visit at a later date as well.
Exactly. It's not something we do lightly. Just want to have a quick look at this coppice stool here, this ash coppice stool. So this is one tree.
That's amazing. It's huge.
Yep. It's huge, but it's also sad because ash dieback. So this is possibly the oldest tree in the wood.
Oh, really?
You're looking probably, say, 3 metres across. Rather than 1 or 2 stems, what we've got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But some of them are dying back. And this is what we're finding, so some of our other woods as well, it's ash dominated like lower wood. There's other great big stools like this that hundreds and hundreds of years for that to develop. And we could lose it in a generation, which is
that's very sad, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's replacing
it's amazing though. I do think this is the sort of tree you'd walk past as a casual visitor and not realise how old it is, you know, because when you think of an old tree in the sort of classic sense in your imagination, you think, I mean, big oak is what my mind goes to. And this is not that. It's just as big, but it's just in separated trunks. So it's kind of, you know, you wouldn't at first glance know that.
Yes, that doesn't look that old, but you think it started off as an ash sapling that was cut, then grew, cut, then grew.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for my tour around Wistow Wood. It's amazing.
Pleasure. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is.
Only
wonderful.
we could go around lots more woods.
I know.
They're all different and they're all really interesting. They've all got their own little stories.
Yes.
It's just amazing places. I wish people would come and see them more and get to know them better.
Yes, absolutely. And there are quite a few to explore around Cambridgeshire. So do go on the website and check out one near you and just walk around and take some time to soak up the atmosphere because it's really amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Matt for being our personal guide around the past, current and future of Wistow Wood, with all the challenges our conservation teams are facing with managing ash dieback and tree diseases, deer, climate change and keeping these magical spaces in the best condition for wildlife, and open for people to enjoy. I hope you're inspired to take a visit to an ancient woodland this spring and summer, as well as having a little more understanding about the work we're doing that you might see more evidence of in autumn and winter, including those woodland closures. To see some pictures of some of the sites we talked about, including what ash dieback looks like, and to find a wood near you, visit wildlifebcn.org/podcast. If you're not already, becoming a member of the Wildlife Trust BCN is a great way to support your local wildlife. Visit wildlifebcn.org/membership to find out more. Every member really does make a difference. A huge thank you to James Williams and Jared Wentwick for the podcast music. And finally, do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And why not listen to some of our previous episodes of In Conservation? Let us know what you think by getting in touch on social media @WildlifeBCN or by dropping us a line from the website. But for now, cheerio.